Utah is a state known for its desert landscapes, majestic mountains, and canyons. But behind all that beauty lies a troubling reality. Rivers that were once full, life-giving arteries are now turning into dried-up ditches. Thousands of miles of what used to be winding, living waterways are slowly losing everything tied to life and proper water resources. How can we fix this? Expensive river and stream restoration programs? Planting millions of riverside plants? Or beavers? Yep, those brilliant engineers of nature. In Utah, they were released straight into a river running through the state's desert lands. It's already tough for these rodents to fix what's been ruined by humans and other factors, and now they're dealing with harsh conditions on top of it. So what came of it? Let's find out. As we already said, Utah's rivers used to be the lifeblood of the desert. Their bends created fairly modest but still decent wetland areas, and they also soaked nearby meadows and shrubs. These ecosystems could be considered rich for the local climate. However, by the mid-19th century, everything had changed. People, as you can imagine, needed to grow crops, set up fields and pastures, and support industry. All of that, of course, required massive amounts of water, which the locals took from the rivers. In the end, canals, dams, and irrigation systems made Utah's waterways weaker and turned them into straight trenches with water rushing faster and no longer sticking around to support ecosystems. On top of the human impact, there was the climate. According to research from the University of Utah, from 1979 to 2023, the peak snowpack in the state's eastern mountains shrank. The amount of water stored as snow dropped by 16%, and the date of peak snow shifted nearly 9 days earlier due to rising winter temperatures. The result: spring runoff got weaker, and many streams are drying up. One lightning strike, an accidental or deliberate fire, and nature, along with the rivers, suffers even more. That's what happened, for example, in 2007 with the Milford Flat Fire. During its entire rampage, the fire destroyed 567 square miles of land, which included forests and riverside vegetation along streams and creeks. And that wasn't the end of the fires, of course. Not even in 2007. That same year there was the Neola North Fire, which burned through a much smaller area, 68 square miles. Still, it played its part in the degradation of the state's waterways. The reason is this: after a fire, the soil loses its ability to hold water. And then every rain washes tons of sediment straight into the riverbeds, eroding the banks and creating new gullies. Because of this, many rivers have narrowed several times over. What used to be a wide river valley with shallows and little islands is now just narrow ditches where the water rushes non-stop, not lingering to soak the meadows and glades along the banks. There's official data to back this up. In the US, there's the Clean Water Act, and it includes a concept called impaired waters, meaning that a river, stream, lake, or pond doesn't meet the state's water quality standards or can't support its designated uses, for example, sustaining aquatic plants and animals. So according to 2022 data, out of roughly 41,000 miles of assessed rivers and streams in Utah, nearly 11,800 miles were found to be unfit. This means that 28% of the state's waterways don't meet the standards, and a big chunk of those rivers can't really support healthy ecosystems. This is the Great Salt Lake. You know what's special about it? Back in the last century, in 1987 to be exact, it looked like this. A lot bigger, right? This lake is basically a sign that the state's got major issues with a big part of its waterways. Since 1850, the amount of water flowing into the lake has dropped by 39%. With a large-scale degradation of Utah's water systems, from 1986 to 2022 the water level in the lake fell by 22 feet, hitting a record low of 3,940 feet above sea level. The surface area shrank from almost 2,300 square miles to just 926 square miles. And yes, as you probably guessed from the name, the Great Salt Lake is salty. What's more, it's salty because it doesn't have any outflow. That means the lake has nowhere to send all the sediment brought in by the rivers that flow into it. As a result, so much stuff from farming and industry is piled up on its bottom that it'd probably be best to just leave it there. However, as the water level drops, all that stuff gets exposed and can end up where it really shouldn't. And this is where beavers come in. Released into one of Utah's rivers, they might just help solve both the lake's issues and the state's deteriorating waterways in general. In 2019 and 2020, scientists from the University of Utah set a goal to bring one of eastern Utah's most depleted arteries, the Price River, back to life with the help of beavers, and to study the whole process. They found the perfect candidates. Each animal first went through a 3-day quarantine at a rehab center, got checked for diseases, and was fitted with a microchip and radio transmitter so researchers could track the nature engineer's movements. And finally, the beavers were released in the right spot. It seemed like the start of an amazing story about a river being reborn in a dry desert region, and it really was. Except first, the relocated rodents had to face a tough challenge. You've probably already figured out that Utah's climate isn't exactly a gift, not just for the rivers, but for nature's top engineers too. They noticed it right away after arriving near the Price River. The long drought caused one of the study sites to dry up completely, and summer temperatures stayed over 100 degrees Fahrenheit for weeks, sometimes even months. Add to this the stress of moving around, plus the fact that natural predators live in the area and don't really get the true purpose why the researchers released beavers. To them, every rodent is just food. In the end, some of the released beavers didn't make it. And some showed exactly why each beaver got a microchip and a tracker. Searching for better conditions, a few of them moved from the originally chosen restoration area as far as 12 miles downstream. Despite all the challenges, it turned out even such tough spots weren't a problem for nature's best engineers. All they needed was some branches, or even stones. Check out how this rodent rolled something that honestly shouldn't be part of beaver building at all. What came out of it was the main thing beavers build, and the key thing the deteriorating Utah waterways need. Of course, that's dams. The first and most obvious thing that happens when a barrier shows up right in the middle of a riverbed is the slowing down of the current. At the same time, studies showed that the speed drops quite a bit, from 3 feet per second down to 1 to 1.6 feet per second. This causes the water to lose its ability to wash away soil particles and stones from the bottom and banks. In other words, a beaver dam is basically a tool that helps reduce erosion on the Price River, one of those waterways in Utah that suffer a lot from this problem. A barrier on a river, like a dam, is the reason why water stops and starts looking for other ways to escape somehow. As a result, ponds appear. They're even called after beavers, beaver ponds. In these ponds, silt, sand, organic deposits, and everything else carried by the river current begins to slow down and settle, which gradually evens out the bottom layer. Besides that, the banks get leveled too. Sediment settles there because of the rising water level. Remember what we said about the eroded trenches replacing the rivers that used to be in Utah? Well, the beavers on the Price River are animals capable of restoring the waterways, so to speak, back to factory settings. And naturally, it doesn't stop there, because the water spreading out over a bigger area dampens the ground near the river. So where, in dry Utah, there wasn't a speck of green, life starts to spout. Yes, so far the beaver reintroduction, which we're talking about today, hasn't really shown big results in this regard. The reason's simple: not enough time and not the best conditions. Still, it's a well-known fact: vegetation will grow where there's moisture. And that'll already be a sign that wetlands have formed, which won't be as vast in places with a better climate, but they'll still be a hot spot for biodiversity. The thing is, insects are drawn to the plants and the general conditions of wetlands, for whom breeding in stagnant water is just perfect. Like those who often bite us non-stop, mosquitoes. They won't be able to live and multiply without any kind of control, because there will be those who see them as food. Amphibians, frogs, some lizards, and other animals will be happy that the wetlands have not only plenty of food like mosquitoes and other insects, but also great conditions. For example, still water, plants, and everything else that characterizes ponds made by beavers. Then, bigger creatures will come, like birds that can feed on both amphibians and insects. For them, wetlands are a place where they can have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and more meals. Yes, the climate definitely isn't very friendly across much of Utah. But we do have an unusual example that shows even in this state, wetlands created by beavers will become home to lots of animals. And as a quirky example, let's bring up the Great Salt Lake itself. No matter how salty it is, along its eastern and northern edges there are freshwater and saltwater wetlands. And these areas are super important habitats, for example, for millions of migrating sandpipers and other water birds all across western North America. We won't list all the species, just say the list is really long. And if the huge number of birds isn't enough to call the area rich in biodiversity, it's worth mentioning that the birds wouldn't have picked a place with no other animals, meaning no food sources. So within the 2019 to 2020 project, they kicked off something that will, without a doubt, truly transform the Price River, making it way greener and more alive. And beaver-made ponds are also a kind of fire protection. For example, there's a study from 2020 done not in Utah, but in other states. Still, it showed how much beaver activity reduces the impact of fires. Areas changed by beavers stayed noticeably greener during wildfires. This was backed up by a special index called NDVI, a measure of vegetation density. On average, the drop in NDVI during fires was 3 times bigger in places without beavers than in those with beaver activity. And if you think that's where all the benefits of beavers end, we haven't even told you about what the Great Salt Lake will get out of this project. Like we said before, dams block a river or stream, which causes ponds to form. That means the area of water in contact with the ground gets way bigger. And what's more, the water stays on the land for a much longer time. Instead of rushing quickly down the channel, water gets held up in ponds, slowly seeping down, recharging the aquifers and raising the overall groundwater level in the nearby floodplain areas. This infiltration process turns streams into a kind of hydrological sponge that can soak up and store significant amounts of water. For example, studies in Colorado found that within a radius of up to 164 feet from dams, groundwater levels rose by 3 to 5 feet. That might not seem like much, but a dam is rarely alone, and neither are the ponds. For the Great Salt Lake, it's perfect that during droughts, the stored groundwater slowly gets released back into the stream and keeps the flow steady. But at the same time, it's worth saying that in the short term, beaver dams will reduce the flow. After all, they make water stay in beaver ponds, and that could make the lake situation worse at some point. Basically, researchers still have a lot of testing to do in this area. And this is exactly why the project on the Price River won't have any impact on the Great Salt Lake, since this waterway isn't a tributary of the struggling lake. However, the ongoing studies might show whether bringing beavers back is a viable option to save the Great Salt Lake. Right now, the researchers on the Price River aren't rushing ahead or drawing long-term conclusions. Yes, the beavers have settled in. Yes, they've already improved the situation on this degrading stretch of river. But everyone knows the conditions here aren't great. So the project is really complicated. There's no guarantee it'll lead to an incredibly successful outcome. But researchers have already figured out how to help beavers even in these conditions. You can turn people into beavers. No, of course not literally. The experts working on reintroducing beavers to the Price River wanted to start building like beavers. Usually, when building a dam like this, people use natural materials from the local landscape, just like beavers who can't just get a bunch of branches delivered. In the same way, other parts of trees, stones, and everything else that can be turned into a barrier on the water without harming the ecosystem will be used. That said, there's a difference from beaver dams. People have tools, so they can build a sturdy structure without using beavers' complex tactics. Typically, to make an artificial dam, raw wooden posts are hammered into the riverbed first, and then thin, flexible branches are woven through. This creates a permeable barrier. Basically, that's where the beaver-style building stops. Why did they decide to get involved at the Price River if beavers can build everything on their own? It's said that this way, the beavers get a foundation for their construction. So you could say they have more motivation to start using their amazing engineering skills. And of course, further releases of beavers are planned as well. So we'll wait. The results of such studies are always interesting. And they also help us understand that beavers really can change landscapes that have seriously degraded for various reasons. Actually, reintroducing beavers in Utah isn't some new project or a recent idea. They clearly get that nature's engineers are key to reaching all sorts of goals. including recovery after catastrophic natural events. For example, in the 2010s there was a huge landslide in Uinta that carved its way down the mountainside and wiped out the local beaver population, which had been key to the region's thriving. In the end, in 2022, biologists from Utah State University, Hill Air Force Base, and the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources decided to bring them back. First, the researchers spent a few hours building basic dams for the beavers. As we mentioned earlier, this way people make things easier for the future local residents. Then, 7 beavers, including 2 adults, were released into the area that was new to them. The goal of the beavers released at the landslide area isn't much different from other reintroduction projects: restoring the landscape, preventing forest fires, helping plants grow, and improving the ecosystem. There aren't really any details about what the reintroduction project has led to, but with that many experts involved, it's hard to believe they'd start something like this without being pretty sure it'll work. And beavers already have a solid track record of getting the job done. And that's just one project. There are plenty more. What's interesting is that in Utah there's a whole organization called the Beaver Ecology and Relocation Collaborative, or BRC, also nicknamed the Beaver Bunkhouse, that handles everything beaver-related in the state. Although beavers are good for restoring ecosystems, they can also cause problems, which is why lots of people want them gone. That's where BRC comes in. The team catches the most active builders, who flood crops, pastures, and threaten roads, and then gives them a short-term stay at a quarantine bungalow. There, the beavers get a checkup and their shots. As soon as the vets confirm the animals are healthy, the most interesting part begins. The beavers head off on a journey, not to a zoo, but to places where rivers are worn down by erosion and drying up. There, in tired riverbeds and forgotten wetlands, the beavers get a chance to put their skills to use, without upsetting farmers or anyone else. At the same time, BRC isn't just letting rodents loose. The team studies the habits of each beaver family closely: who's digging burrows where, what types of trees they like best, and what population density works best to fight erosion. Thanks to all that prep, they're building not just healthy ecosystems, but also strong partnerships with Utah's Division of Wildlife Resources, local farmers, and landowners. Together, they're learning how to live in harmony with beaver engineering. And that's key to keeping everyone happy: rivers and their ecosystems, the beavers and the people.